If you've ever heard someone say, just fade the public and you'll win more than you lose, this video is going to be for you. Today, we're going to be testing that idea, and it's going to be tested as a market concept. We're going to be breaking down the NFL betting market into basically 5 different outlooks, and the goal here isn't going to be to sell you a magic angle, it's to compare how each of these market perspectives actually performed over the 2025 season. So by the end of this video, you'll see what worked, what didn't work, and why fade the public is just way too vague to stand on its own. So before we even get into the data, we have to talk about why this idea never dies. Fade the public is probably one of the most common phrases in sports betting, and you're going to hear it everywhere, right? Twitter, group chats, podcasts, no matter where you go, you're going to hear it in the betting industry. And honestly, it sounds right. It's simple, it feels logical, and it feels repeatable. If the public is usually wrong, just bet the other side, problem solved. But here's the issue with that. Nobody actually agrees on what the public is. Some people think it's just the side with the most tickets. Others think it means just casual bettors. Others even think it's bad money. And because of that, other things like market analysis, like contrarian betting, sharp money, and line movement all get thrown into the same bucket. They're talked about like the same thing when they're actually not. And that's going to be the reason for the video today. Before you can ask, does fade the public work? You first need a clear framework for what you're actually going to be fading. Now, if you like this kind of data first sports betting case studies, hit the like button, as that will tell us to keep making content that uses actual bets to see what works and what does not. So before we look at any of the results, we have to lock in the definitions that we're going to be using, because if we don't agree on the language, the data is not going to matter. So in this study, I looked at the market through 5 different lenses. You're going to see them here. The first one's going to be the public. That's simply the side receiving the majority of the bet tickets. There's no assumptions here, just where most bets are being placed. Next one is going to be contrarian, and that's any side receiving less than 30% of the tickets. This is purely about being on the unpopular side. So nothing more, nothing less. The sharp side is going to be this is where a side is getting fewer bets, but a higher share of the money. The idea here is that you're looking at where the money is, not necessarily the betting tickets. The fourth one is going to be this sharp contrarian place. This is going to be a little bit of a mixture here. It's going to be this is the condition where both are true at the same time, right? It's going to be less than 30% of the tickets, but then the higher share of the money, right? So basically, you're in the sweet spot. Then finally, we have reverse line movement. And that's when a side has fewer tickets but still shows close in line value, meaning the line moved in its favor by the close. Now, here's the important part to remember now. These are not the same thing, right? A bet can be contrarian without being sharp. A bet can be sharp without being extremely contrarian. Now, a quick clarification for this, though, before anyone loses their mind in the comment section. These are not universal or perfect definitions here for these terms. They're the best representation we can use based on the data that we actually have to access. So for example, does fewer tickets and closing line value always mean true reverse line movement? No. And does being on the side with the most tickets automatically mean that only the public is betting it? Also no. So sharp money can absolutely exist on popular sides. You have to remember that. And the public can absolutely be on the right side of some bets. What we're doing here is isolating market behavior. These definitions give us consistent lens to compare those results. So it's not a claim that one group owns one side of the market and the other one does not. We just want some good definitions here, because I know sharp people are going to come here and go, well, that technically doesn't mean. You have to calm down. It's just helping some of the more casual bettors make that bridge to getting a little bit more education. That's all we're trying to do here. So let's pause for a second and talk about exactly what bets we included in the study. So first, it's going to cover the 2025 NFL regular season and playoffs. It was pretty obvious. We're not counting the Super Bowl. We're dropping this video before it. So that's intentional. We want consistent game context across all data. Second, we only looked at the point spread bets. We're not mixing in money lines or totals here because each of those markets behaves differently, and those could muddy the results for everyone. Third is going to be we use betting splits. We just showed you in the last slide, meaning we looked at how many tickets, how much money on each side got. That's where our public versus contrarian splits come from. Um, and finally, we track close and line value, meaning we know whether the entry price beat the close or not. And that's going to be important for one of the lenses. And it's a key part of seeing if you're consistently beating the closing number. The bottom line here, though, is that this isn't half baked or cherry picked. This is clear. It's consistent sample of NFL spread markets with the variables that we wanted to test. So now let's get into the results and see where they all, fall into place. Let's start with the public. For this study, the public simply means the side receiving the majority of bet tickets, nothing more than that. And this represents a consensus opinion. So it's narrative driven betting, recent results, star players, what everyone's talking about that week, right? From the sportsbook's perspective, this is also where you expect the most exposure because it's where the volume is. So the question that we're testing is simple. Does betting with the crowd hurt long term? Well, based on the data, the answer is pretty clear here. The public, it went 116 wins and 166 losses, which is about 41% win rate, right? That translated to over 60 units in loss with a rate of return of about negative 21%. So it doesn't mean that the public was always wrong on individual games. Plenty of these bets won, as you could see, but over a full season sample, consistently betting with the crowd was a losing approach. So yes, fading the public worked better than betting with the crowd this season, but let me show you which lens actually made you profitable. And quick question for you, do you usually bet with the crowd or against it? Drop a comment down below. I want to see how most bettors actually approach this. All right, now let's move on to the next lens, which is going to be contrarian betting. And for this study, contrarian simply means the side receiving less than 30% of the tickets. And this represents the unpopular side. So you're betting against the consensus, against what most people feel comfortable with. And importantly, there's no requirement here for money confirmation. This is just asking one question. What happens when you consistently take the unpopular side? So that's the test. Is being unpopular enough to create an edge? Well, based on the results, this is where things start to get interesting. Contrarian bets finished 51 wins and 31 losses, good for about a 62% win rate. That's right, that's on spread bets, 62%. That resulted in plus 15 units with a return on investment under 19%. So, yes, betting against the crowd clearly outperformed betting with the crowd when you're just talking about the contrarian approach. Next up is sharp money lens. For this study, sharp simply means the side that had fewer tickets but had higher share of money. So the idea here is pretty straightforward. When you see fewer bets but more money, that usually points to bigger average bet size, fewer people but more conviction behind it. So you're talking about those true players in the market are really pounding a team that nobody else is looking at. So the question is testing, does following the money outperform the ticket-based approach? And the answer is yes, but with some limitations. Sharp bets finished for 36 wins and 28 losses, which is about 56% win rate. That came out to just under 5 units gained with about a return on investment about 7%. So following the money did improve results compared to betting with the public, but it wasn't the best performing lens we looked at, and that's an important distinction. Now let's look at what sounds like the holy grail, right? Sharp contrarian. This is the setup that a lot of bettors think they're hunting for. For this study, sharp contrarian means a side with less than 30% of the tickets and a higher share of the money. In theory, this represents the unpopular side with money backing it. So the side with the highest information density, fewer bets, more conviction. So the question we're testing here is pretty straightforward. Does combining contrarian position with money actually improve outcomes? And based on that data, this is where expectations break. Sharp contrarian bets finished 1 win and 3 losses, a 25% win rate that resulted in just over 2 units loss and an ROI of about negative 52%. Now, before anyone overreacts, this is a small sample. And I'm not saying this is a setup that is useless. What this does tell us is that stacking signals doesn't automatically create an edge. In some cases, it can even be misleading, right? Now, I want to address something important here, though. In a previous video on this channel, How to Read the Sports Betting Market, we talked about the sharp contrarian spots as the side that you want to be on. And that still makes sense. The issue here isn't necessarily the framework, It's going to be the sample size, right? First, there just wasn't many qualifying sharp contrarian bets this season. And then second, in that very small sample, the results just didn't, they didn't show up. So that doesn't mean that the lens is broken. It just means that any specific season, even the side that is best to be on the long term, might not pan out in the short sample. And that's exactly why we track this type of stuff. So we can separate what sounds right from what actually shows up in the data. Now let's talk about reverse line movement. For this study, reverse line movement, it means fewer bet tickets plus close in line value. Now, the line moves towards the betting side, fewer people are betting on. This is what a lot of people think of as a market confirmation, right? The minority side is getting support, and then the price is moving in their favor. Well, the results kind of back that up. This group went 104 wins, 61 losses, and a 63% win rate, up 33.6 units with a 20% return on investment. This is the best performance that we've seen so far. But here's an important caveat that I have to put out to you guys. Close in line value is an after the fact metric. You only know for sure that you beat the closing line once the game has already started. So closing line value by itself isn't something that you can blindly bet in real time. What you actually need to do is find either a fundamental factor or a stat or a technical factor, whatever it is that tends to correlate with closing line value. That will help it. So then before kickoff, you use the betting splits as confirmation tool aligned with that factor that shows you the closing line value, and you can line up the bet. So you identify the side that has edge in the underlying factor. You want to see it, make sure that it's on that unpopular side, and boom, you make that play. So remember, reverse line movement isn't the cause of winning. It's the market just telling you that something you already liked was probably priced too cheaply. So if this video helped you think about, how to read the market a little bit more and just, better approaches to the market, not just who's betting, make sure to subscribe. So that's what we do here: structure, pricing, process, and we give you a little bit more in terms of the market feel. So, does fade in the public work? Yes, but not in the way most people think. So, if you blindly bet against the public, you did outperform betting the crowd this season. But fade the public by itself is just way too vague to be a strategy. When we went deeper, right, the picture got a little bit clearer to us. Simply being contrarian, taking the unpopular side, performed very, very well. And then adding sharp money, it had good results, but it wasn't automatic. And then we combined the two. We said, hey, how about we go sharp and contrarian? Well, that didn't necessarily magically create that edge that we were looking for over the long run of the season. The strongest and most consistent signal that we saw was the reverse line movement. And it's not because of the label is special, it's just because it reflects how the market responds to information. And that's the real takeaway from the market, right? How the market responds to information. So the edge isn't about fading the public, the edge is understanding how the betting market moves, who influences the price, and when that line is telling you something that the ticket or the ticket count really can't, right? There's no magic system here, just better questions, better filters, and better context. So if these case study videos where we take real bets and use them to help you find processes and strategies really help, please hit that like button. Also subscribe if you want more breakdowns focused on price, structure, and market behavior. We're also here for that. Drop a comment down below on what matters more to you right now: contrarian betting, sharp money, or even reverse line movement. At Grandstand Sports Data, we're here to understand how the market actually moves. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.